Welcome once again to the BOBCAST, Bob World Builder Patreon podcast. I'm Bob.
And I'm Grace.
Yeah.
World Destroyer.
Right. I don't mean I'm Bob World Builder.
I think you know by now that I'm Grace World Destroyer.
Yeah. You know what's actually funny is when I told you I was recently Googling, trying to see where the website, spoiler alert, well, the patrons already know about the website happening, but it is Googleable. It's just on like the third or fourth page. But when typing Bob World Builder just into Google, Bob World Builder Grace was the first suggested other term. How does that make you feel?
That people are just, they don't even bother to Google Grace World Destroyer on its own.
Yeah. Crap, yeah.
How hard is that to remember?
Come
on.
I don't know. It can't be that bad. Anyway, today we're going to do something a little different where we're going to be pulling a topic just from this big, I don't know, it's a normal community post, but that got a lot of comments where I asked on YouTube, question to all DMs, what's the biggest or most common problem you face as a dungeon master?
It's a really sweet wizard pick, by the way.
Yeah, that's like a classic D&D. I think that was on the original, like, not Unearthed Arcana, but maybe original DM screen or something from like first edition. But anyway, yeah, it got like 5 or actually close to 600 comments. So we were just going to look at maybe 1 or 2 of them for this. I mean, I'm probably going to make some videos about some of these responses as well, because it's just a lot of things that obviously people need help with. And I think we might just go with the first, or I should say the top comment. It received the most likes. It also happened to be from a person who has like a successful D&D channel as well. Blaine Simple. I don't know if you've ever watched any of their videos. They do some like tier listy stuff.
Nope.
Okay. Well, it's a good channel. And this one stood out to Grace right away. Why don't you read the prompt?
Wanting to have enough game material prepared to give the party a well-thought-out experience while also offering players the freedom to explore. Improv is great, but too much always gives campaigns an amateur appeal. Similarly, prepping every detail is better off a task for an author. Finding that middle ground is my hardest problem.
Yeah.
So, Blaine, here's what I do. I do prep like a bunch of different stuff and just let the players run around in it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how much of a solution that actually is, but reading this just made me think of like the random encounter strategy that I use.
What's that? Which
is to actually plan out all the random encounters that my characters are going to face on travel. Yes. It's not like something happens every single day.
Right.
But I try to do like 5 or 6 things that happen. And they're usually not even combat. They're just like 5
or 6 things per day?
No.
Oh, okay.
Per travel.
Gotcha.
So just traveling from one place to another. I think of like some people they could meet or like weird things they see.
Yeah.
Because I know that like players, when they see something that's weird, they're going to engage with that for hours.
Yeah, that is the nature of this quote unquote problem.
So like, yeah, it delays travel kind of, but it still feels like, even if it's like the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
Like the example of like a rock that has a slightly magic aura and you don't even know why it does. It just does. Your players are going to feel like so free to just stare at that rock.
I think that's what a lot of D&D is. That's what a lot of D&D is, actually. That's it, like.
So here, I think here's what my actual solution is to this question. Prepare things, but not outcomes.
Yes.
So your players basically create what the outcome is going to be through their exploration of an object or a location.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where a lot of DMs, it can lead to over prep and then like these weird unmet expectations, because a DM might start with the way, like the idea originally might be how they overcome some crazy thing. But really the job is to just come up with the problems. Like whether that be on a, campaign overarching scale, like what is the big bad's plan to take over and do whatever, or even just like what they're going to find on the road. And then it's really all up to them how they handle it. You shouldn't be planning solutions for them.
Yeah. Lately, I've created 2 places that parties need to get into. And then I just write, I'm sure they'll find a way in somehow. Like, the door's locked, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And they always do.
They do. I mean, and yeah, seriously, that's what it's all about and that's what makes, I mean, this, I don't know, it's just really hitting home for me the way you described it as like having all those things out there, not planning the solutions, because that is something that, as frequent listeners of the podcast might know, my friend Dan, who was my first DM, just did really well, even though he was new to DMing, was like he made a map and it just had some locations, some probably not super intentionally like evocative names though. Like he just did it well, and we're like, yeah, we want to go there. And on the way we'd have some interesting travel encounters and always be random stuff because he did a lot of random generator stuff. And so maybe an issue with that is where they weren't planned ahead of time, I guess, some of the random encounters. Like in a video I did on random encounters a while ago, basically my point is what exactly you just said, that they shouldn't exactly be random. Like they should be maybe tied to something else going on and at least representative of like the region in some way. Like It's never truly random.
But by doing it like that, it's not completely improv, but you still save yourself time by not mapping out every little detail of what your players will experience.
I mean, I guess one problem I can see with what you described though, is like, oh, I just do this and let them run around. That's kind of what like the Icewind Dale book wants the DM to do. Like, oh, here are all these 10 towns and they all have their own quest. And then beyond that, in chapter 2, which like we pretty much skipped, it's like 20 locations, or some of them aren't tied to a specific most of them I think are not tied to a specific location, but just like events, encounters basically that can happen out in the wilderness of Icewind Dale, but there's no motivations to get there or like to go and experience these things. So that I think is where the DM does need to create those hooks.
Yeah, or just player backstory comes into play there.
Exactly. And that's the easiest thing, is like, someone who lives here, or like it could be someone they've been looking for, or it could just literally be like, oh yeah, this person might have information about this other thing you're really curious about.
Yeah, like my campaigns have backstory hooks in certain places, and then there's also like an overarching story. So if they can't find anything for the overarching story, then they might find something for the backstory arc, or vice versa. Yeah.
Really, I think, I don't know, when you read this aloud just now, it really made me just think of the classic sandbox versus railroad dilemma, because they're kind of laying it out as if there's these 2 options of how exactly did they phrase it? Improv is great, but too much always gives campaigns an amateur feel, and then prepping every detail is better off task for an author, finding the middle ground. So, and I think of that as like the railroad is planning every detail, especially where you're literally planning the outcomes and then segues into whatever's next. Like that is the railroad, and the sandbox is, here are all these points. You can go wherever you want, but often that leaves players with kind of a decision fatigue or like analysis paralysis kind of thing, where they just don't know what they should do and need a nudge in one or two directions.
So what you want is Matt Colville's sandbox on rails.
Exactly, yeah. So this is, in that sense, this has kind of been answered before. I guess it is a matter of, like they stated in the question, finding that middle ground. Like, right. What does the sandbox on rails look like for your campaign?
The answer is only prep half of an event and let your players figure it out themselves.
I mean, and that's it. I guess there can't be a specific answer unless they literally broke down like what's going on in their campaign right now, because I guess it has to be this vague answer of kind of what you just said. You only really want to plan the challenge ahead of them. What issue is there going on in the world that they could choose to engage with? You also should plan a little hook. Could be a big hook, but a little hook is all you need. You just need some hook to maybe get them to interact with it. And on top of that, you kind of only want to do this like one session out. You don't want to be thinking of, what are these things they might face 4 or 5 sessions from now? Because
to an extent, you have to.
If it's the overarching thing, I guess.
To an extent, you have to, because you have to know, like, what are the consequences for the actions? Because that way, down the road, Like, you're not just coming up with stuff up off the cuff. Because in the first, like, maybe 10 sessions of the campaign, the party's going to do a bunch of stuff. And then the rest of the campaign can be just based off of the stuff
Their
that they did.
first few decisions. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I've run things, but I also feel like that almost leaves, like, it involves a lot of upfront prep if you do it that way, where you want to have all those points in place and then knowing how they connect. So
not necessarily. It's just like what I said. You come up with a few things. They solve things however they're going to. And then you just jump off those things. You don't even need to have that much.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the point, is then, okay, I feel like your next session just needs to have whatever the main problem is going to be. And it's based off of, at the end of your previous session, when your players told you, because you should always ask this, hey, where are you guys going next? Or like, what are you going to do next after this? So then you know like what to fill out, and you're just really filling out, again, the issue, whether that be a location or whatever, but you're not solving it for them. So that way, when they say, oh, we want to go here, and it's like the one option you didn't plan out that much, it's okay. Because then it's like, oh, I didn't waste any time on those other ones. I just left them all pretty vague, and now I'm going to plan that next session.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
But let's go to the next one.
Well, actually, I'd like to see some of the comments here, because this one got a lot of replies. I saw that the people on WebDM give a good answer. Just tell them the truth. You weren't prepared for them to go somewhere, and if they want to do that, you need some time to prepare that, or they can play what you have prepared and do that other thing next time.
I literally did that last week.
Yeah. Yeah, this is good. Like, this is a good way to just be transparent with your players, which is always important. But I do think, I don't know, a lot of DMs might worry about like, oh no, that'll break the immersion, that there isn't this fully fleshed out world.
Who cares?
But like, a lot of people don't expect that.
Just tell them like,
yeah.
It'll be better next time if I end the session early and take some time to prepare.
Exactly. It's always better to have them kind of wanting like, oh, what's going to happen next time, instead of, let's just try to like fumble through this. It just depends on what degree you are prepared to.
But then you could prepare a really cool village where there's going to be a really cool banshee fight, and then your parties will decide not to stay in the village because they're afraid the villagers are cannibals.
Oh, yeah, that can happen.
That can happen.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's why you don't plan too far ahead. How long did you spend on that banshee stat block?
Like, I did not build the banshee stat block.
Okay. Grace has a stat block building
I was
addiction.
just gonna leave it the way it was, but then add 2 ghosts to the fight.
Okay.
And now that banshee's being quantum trolled to another location, so
nice. All right, what do you think about this other reply that just says use random tables?
You can. I've done it, but I'm one of those people that like I roll on it, and then I'm like, I don't want to do that now, and I roll again, and I'm like, I don't want to do that either, and I just keep doing it. And
yeah, I think this answer, like, that's way too. That is to me what actually gives campaigns a quote unquote amateur appeal.
Yeah.
Where
veteran players
there's clearly no direction.
Veteran players can usually tell when you're using random tables.
Yeah, and they can see you rolling.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
but like we were saying, it can feel a bit amateurish. And basically like it doesn't matter what we do in this encounter because it's just random.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Well, and then it's like, oh no, like what if this encounter ended up being super strong, and like you don't want necessarily one of your player characters to die in a throwaway random
boring
encounter.
Like what if you roll for them to fight like 20 wolves?
Yeah,
are you gonna do that? No.
It's just a waste of time.
The party, I mean, first of all, like they're probably just gonna walk right past what are the wolves gonna do? Really stop them?
I don't know.
Think about what wolf behavior actually is.
Right. So I think the point is here, maybe I mentioned this when I brought up the random encounter video, is you need to like design your own random encounter table. Pretty much.
Yeah, that's really actually appropriate for your setting and the location. Because the ones in Xanathar's Guide are good, but they are extremely broad.
Right. They're just regional based on kind of ecology, I guess you could say, like kind of different biomes.
But a lot of times they don't really make sense.
Yeah.
For the
and
location.
You want them, well, yeah, and they could be all over the place in terms of level range, which is okay to an extent. You don't want to always throw encounters that perfectly like match your character levels or whatever. So it's good to have some easy encounters. It's good to have some tough ones, but those aren't going to necessarily have any hooks to something in your game. You can use them and maybe be inspired by them, but don't rely on them. Like that should not be the answer to this problem. Somebody else said, I appreciate how to be a great GM's approach to this. It's not solely the responsibility of the DM/GM to come up with story. This is a collaborative process, and DMs shouldn't be placing all the burden on themselves. Likewise, players shouldn't just sit back and expect the DM to do all the heavy lifting. This is a shallow interpretation of his material. Check out his vids for better explanation.
Yeah, but that's basically what we were saying is like, you prep the event, they complete it with their actions.
Yeah. Just relying on the players to fill in some of the gaps. Plan basic outlines. Yeah, these are good now. I have a list of names and races NPCs. That's important. Always have a list
I never
of names.
have names prepared.
I heard you in the last session. My name?
My name is...
What did you say, Donald?
I said Donald at first.
And then extended
and then
it to
I was like,
ridiculous.
It's short for Donalder Vasterstad or something like that.
So have a list of names. That's just really the best DM advice there is. Because
I kind of like what I'm doing where they can tell that I don't have a name ready and then they kind of laugh.
I just blanked though. Like you came up with Donald. I would just sit there for a minute, like not literally, like I don't know. I just freeze. I feel like I need something.
I've had some pretty weird ones like Donald, Oprah.
That's actually pretty good. Oprah sounds like a D&D name.
Shalaya.
That's nice. A little shillelagh.
I mean, I'm not saying they're bad. They're just kind of weird.
Well, they're not going to be normal. This is fantasy. Somebody said this is where a published campaign comes in handy. I agree.
Yeah.
It just depends on the campaign.
I often find that random encounter tables in modules are way too small. Like in Out of the Abyss, for traveling around a really large area, there were like 8 things that you could randomly encounter. It's like they're just going to encounter those same 8 things over and over. That's boring.
Okay. All right. And now our next question here is just the second most liked after that first one.
Elsarin says, my worst problem, I feel, is getting everyone engaged in the action. There is at least one player in the group that is silent for nearly the whole session. That and the fact that my players still struggle at knowing what their characters do, which leads to both mishaps of great proportions that can frustrate said players or just excessively long turns.
Okay. There's kind of a few problems.
Yeah. First of all, getting everyone engaged with one silent player, that person could totally be engaged. As long as they're not like on their phone or anything.
That's what I was thinking here. Is it always the same person that is silent, or do they mean there's always one? Just because they
aren't speaking doesn't mean they're not engaged.
Yeah.
And they may just enjoy the game differently than others.
Exactly.
And not really want to engage in roleplay.
That is 100% a play style.
Yeah.
To just kind of be along for the ride.
It doesn't hurt. Like when you're playing, you've noticed they've been silent for a while. You just say, and what does this person think about this? And usually they'll give you an answer.
Yeah, just prompting them.
Yeah.
Because
some people might just feel like they can't get a word in.
Yes. Because some people just need more space. Like the little few second gaps between other people talking just isn't enough for everybody. Especially like just depending on how they're processing whatever's going on. And that could just be them, like as a person. So they might just need to be directly asked. And that's the easiest way to engage anyone in the action is literally engage them. Like, hey, you, what is your character doing right now? Or what are you thinking about? It doesn't even what are you doing? Just what are they thinking right now?
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing to translate because then they don't have to come up with some dialogue. They don't have to worry about speaking a voice. Just what are you thinking about right now?
I especially try to do this with new players in a group in their first session, just to make sure they know that like they can speak up. Yeah. They don't have to like take a back seat to all the like players who have been in there since the beginning.
Right.
basically.
Okay, that and the fact that my players will still struggle. Yeah, and so this is kind of a separate problem. Still struggle to know what their characters do.
That's just going to be happening until they learn the game better, basically. Yeah. As long as they're putting the work in to learn what the characters do, then that's fine. Just give them time to learn.
Yeah, so this could be on another level, like they're just not engaged with the game of D&D itself, where they're not like trying to learn how their characters really work, and then they're just frustrated that they don't know it, in which case maybe D&D, as written, is just not the right game. And you can kind of, I don't want to say dumb things down, but just simplify it and use more of your own play style so that they'll be able to retain what their characters do.
Yeah. And as for excessively long turns, get a 2-minute timer. If they can't figure out what they're going to do, they just make a melee attack against the closest creature.
Right. And really, I'm looking at this again and just thinking that this comes from, I think, the play style of what I can do is my character sheet. Like it should actually be really easy to think of in a situation. What will my character do? That's what the whole game actually is. It's just like that role playing, being in their mind of like, how would they react to this? And most of those answers don't have to be a combat feature, right? It's only in combat where then if they're overanalyzing like the whole situation of what they think they want to do. But I don't know, but even then it's like, just think about what they want to do. And then the DM should be able to point to like, okay, well, your class is this thing, maybe that. I don't know. Obviously, still a timer is helpful though.
Yeah.
Just for keeping it quick, like that'll help them get them on track, but then not relying too heavily on the sheet and just really thinking, what would they do? Let's see what some other people said for this one. Put phones away is numero uno.
Yeah.
I mean, if that is a problem, that's definitely a good thing to try.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it's not your fault if your players have their phone out.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the phone's fault because it's designed to lock in someone's attention.
Yeah.
And make you addicted to it.
This is a two-way street. Your players should be putting in the effort to engage themselves as well. And that means putting their phones away and paying attention to you.
I also do think though, like if used effectively, phones can be an awesome tool because it's really easy to look up stuff and then figure out what they want to do on their turn.
So specifically not scrolling Tumblr or Reddit or Twitter, whatever.
Yeah.
They are allowed to be watching Bob World Builder videos during the session, though.
Oh, yeah. Yep, 100%. Other people say, I feel this on a deep level. I have this exact same issue. So definitely people connecting with this one. Sometimes when I see that a player is being quiet, unattentive, or nervous, I like to have the NPC say the character's name in a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just in character.
Yeah, in the world, calling on them for something.
Yeah, this makes it easier and more comfortable for the player to respond in character. For my party, that is. Wow, what a great answer from Nathan Watts. I love how he just tagged it, like, for my party. Like that works for us kind of thing. Because that's another thing. Every group's going to be a little different. Oh, this person said it's a bad idea to put them on the spot, replying to another commenter. They'll often do something just to get out of the situation if put on the spot. Right.
So what? Even if they're getting out of the situation, they're still engaging.
Yeah, I guess this person is saying like they probably don't want to be in the spotlight, and that's why that is their play style. But I think it's good to at least try it.
Yeah.
Or the best case of all is, as always, is just ask that player, hey, I noticed you didn't really say much that whole session. Is there something I could do to get you involved more? Or do you just prefer kind of passively, being part of it passively? Just literally asking them.
I do have a player that's kind of on and off sometimes, but I know he's paying attention because he always knows what's going on. She's like, some sessions he just doesn't talk that much, but others he does. So I just kind of leave it alone, personally. Yeah. There's a hot take in the next reply. Doesn't work all the time for everyone, but one handy thing I have found is banning fighter, barbarian, or monk to new players.
Whoa.
Those classes encourage being a, quote, lump anytime combat isn't happening and have very little in the way of mechanical framing for social roleplay. Just dissecting that part a little bit, I feel like that really depends on the player, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. People who pick those classes might pick them because they do only care about being really good in combat. And that's a perfectly valid way to enjoy playing D&D.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're a new player, like fighter and barbarian, are definitely have like the fewest or most easily understood class features, I think.
The classes that I suggest for new players are fighter, cleric, and it used to be wizard, but like wizard can also be really complex.
Yeah.
But really it's just like, do you want to punch? Do you want to cast? Do you want to heal? And I know like the whole like, oh, the cleric's only heal thing is kind of outdated, but like, I don't know. That's what people
maybe
outside the game really associate clerics with, I think. So.
Yeah. Honestly, off the top of my head, I'd say like fighter.
Oh, rogue. That was another one that
Well, and that makes sense because those are all the
sneak?
core. Those are all the basic, like even in 5e, those are like the basic four. And weirdly now Bard is included, sort of. But anyway, I was going to say fighter. I do think Barbarian is pretty like understandable even at level 1 for a new player.
Yeah.
And maybe even like a sorcerer. Because it's like wizard, but you just know your spells. You're not like, oh, what's this book? You're not preparing anything.
That's probably a better caster class for beginners.
It's not like a cleric where you're choosing from a list and preparing. You just have what you know. So, I mean, I guess actually with that regard, that is how Bard works too. So maybe that's good.
Yeah. Let's continue. I don't want to judge this person just based on the first sentence.
Yeah, totally.
More experienced and comfortable role players can use those classes just fine. But newer, less confident players often need a reason or excuse to interact that starting with a class like Paladin, Rogue, Sorcerer, or Cleric offers. A player saying, I roll for persuasion is a hell of a lot better than them staring their fighter's athletic skill while everyone else plays the game.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said to the other one, though. This person is literally just saying, like, give them something to do on their character sheet. And so maybe it can help, if the class kind of facilitates roleplay, but you shouldn't build up this dependence on the character sheet for what you can do.
And also I want to say, what stops a fighter from rolling persuasion?
Well, I think what they're saying is like, the paladin, high charisma, the rogue.
Right, but what I'm saying is like the fighter does not have access to the persuasion skill.
But
they can still do it.
Yeah,
they're not going to be.
This person's assuming that if it's not a thing they're good at, that the players won't do it.
Right, which is honestly, I'm sorry,
a bad take.
But it's silly.
Yeah.
I try to do things that I'm bad at. I'm not the person who, like, while investigating a room is like, who has the highest investigation skill of our party? If I'm the one looking, I'm the one who investigates.
Yeah.
I don't butt in when another player wants to persuade, but I'm the bard and they're the fighter I should be persuading. No, they're talking, they're persuading. That's I
definitely
how
used to think
be.
that way, but it's way better when you don't think that way.
Yeah, it shouldn't be based on how good you are at a skill necessarily. Yeah. Unless it makes sense. Like, the rogue probably should be the one looking for traps because they know what to look for. They're a rogue.
So basically, I do think like this is a useful response. Because like I said, it can be helpful if you have a player who's gonna kind of default to their sheet and want to do things that they're good at, that they know they have a feature related to, but it is this slippery slope of then building up a dependency on the sheet, and then you're only gonna want to do things that you're good at or that you have a feature related to, and where really the game should just be you thinking of something. Like you almost shouldn't like need a character sheet for D&D. It's like you just think of what your character would do, and the DM explains how it works.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with that now that I've been a DM for a while, of like trying to think outside the box, because I know what things I would allow and what things are possible. So I sometimes feel like I'm being exploitative when I ask to do something that is kind of outside the rules. Because like I try not to ask questions. Yeah. I try not to ask to do things that I wouldn't allow personally.
Yeah.
But like sometimes I'm like, this is the only thing I feel like would work in this situation. So I still ask. But
yeah, I mean, that's why, I don't know. That's why the rules can get in the way of the fun.
Yeah. Because
a lot of times people will only make decisions based on what they know is in the book. And that's why new players are like so good at D&D, because they're not limited by it. Yeah. All right. I feel like we're going to wrap it up here for today. We'll probably come back to this post, future podcast episodes, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Okay. Keep building.
Stop.
Just stop.
Just stop.
Stop recording?
Stop everything.
Now?
This is the day you finally stop.
Living?
Goodbye.